An old friend of mine used to always tell me, little engines can do big things. But does that mean they have to carry a big price tag as well? This little logging train has a hefty price tag in the Lionel 2025 Volume 1 catalog. Does it really earn that price tag, or is there a better way to enjoy a Heisler? Let's check it out.
Honestly, if you want a new Heisler steam engine out of Lionel's latest 2025 catalog, you could just start charging $1 to each person that complains about the price. Heck, if you'd started that back in January when Lionel announced this engine, you'd have enough to buy one by now. These are listed for $1,699, and while it's not the only train in the catalog that carried a high price tag, it is the smallest sized legacy-equipped steam engine offered, but not the cheapest. If you turn to the very next page of that same catalog, the 442 Atlantic is listed at $999, and that engine is 3 inches longer, and just bigger in general. In the previous 2024 catalog, Lionel had listed their 26-inch long Berkshire engines, a hefty machine, for the same price as the seemingly humble Heisler. Ouch! Inflation and tariffs aside, it's still hard to stomach the price if you just look at the size of the engine you're getting. But hang on, there's an argument to be made about the intricate workings underneath that are quite impressive. Heislers are neat machines, made for hauling timber along logging lines. Instead of traditional running gear we're used to seeing on steam engines, these geared locomotives have a neat V-shaped set of pistons that turn a drive shaft that sends power to the front, middle, and rear wheels. There's a lot going on under there, more so than you'd get from a traditional set of running gear on a regular steam locomotive. My son affectionately refers to these as mini triplexes because they have 3 sets of running wheels. It's impressive to watch and completely functional. Sure, it only measures in at 15 inches long, but it's one of the reasons I've really enjoyed running this one on the elevated line, since you can look up at it and really see the star of the show spinning underneath. Speaking of that, I suppose it's as good a time as ever to explain the example you've been watching here. For those who have noted the date in which this video was being aired, it's currently March of 2025. Nothing from the 2025 catalog has reached customers yet. It will be months until the new Heislers start to arrive. So how do I have a legacy-equipped whistle steam blowing example here to show you? Well, surprise, surprise, Lionel has made these before. Early 2000s Lionel was apparently a fun time if I look back at some of my favorite engines. I wasn't collecting these trains back then, so if you were, feel free to chime in on what was going on around that time. Leave me a comment. I do just seem to get the impression that there were a lot of new things to be excited for. Lion Masters were taking off, and you know I love those. New designs were coming out with every catalog. Just seems like there was a lot of progress, especially if you were into scale models from Lionel. In 2003, they released the Heisler with TMCC at its core. Then later in 2015, they released it again, but with the Legacy system and no whistle steam on this one. But the example you see here was part of the 2016 Volume 2 catalog, and it did have whistle steam. It came in a set, and since I found this one pre-loved, it didn't come with those extra cars, but that's fine by me. By itself, the Heisler was listed for $740. That's half of what the same engine with the same features in the 2025 catalog is listed for. Sure, it doesn't have the latest Bluetooth-enabled controls, but for Pete's sake, it's still a really good deal. And to me, this engine is just another example of why the secondhand market can be really good for collectors. I've actually got a handful of engines in my roster that are in the 2025 catalog that have just been reissued, and I'm really happy I found them on auctions and listings and websites for much less than the new catalog prices. In this specific case, this Heisler was found on trains.com. Yes, with a Z. I've made guides about how to best utilize their website, especially to find specific things you're on the hunt for, and this is a perfect example of how that worked in my favor. When I saw the Heislers in the 2025 catalog, I was like, wow, that's cool. I'd love to add one of these unique pieces to our roster, but then I saw the price tag, and I just couldn't justify that. After learning more about how they work, and all the neat details, it was just hard to overcome the staggering cost. But in searching for information, I found this older version from 2016. Then I got the SKU number for it, searched for out-of-stock listings of the Heisler on trains.com, and put it in my wish list. Later on, I got an email saying one of my wish list items was available, so I checked it out. I waited for the price to come down a bit, and purchased it. So if you haven't used Trains before, or even if you've been a loyal customer of theirs for ages, you can save a little by using my coupon code DATAFIED at checkout to save yourself $10 off your order of $50 or more. It helps you, it helps us, and yes, thanks in advance if you've used it before, or if you're planning to do it soon. So back to the latest and greatest logger in the catalog, and also the only one. I did a little more digging on that price tag to see if other versions released in 2003, 2015, and 2016 were just as expensive compared to other locomotives in their respective catalogs. In 2003, it was $1,199, and that comes to $1,960 in today's money, adjusted for inflation. In 2015, it was $1,299, which would make it $1,750 today. Actually, a better deal. In the 2016 run, it's difficult to do since it was in a set with 4 other cars included, but that set was $1,499, which would have been $1,994 in today's cash. So if you really want a Heisler when it comes to the new prices, this 2025 listing is actually right in line with what the others have been. But if you do any sort of research on what these cost secondhand, you'll save hundreds or even half like I did. It didn't take long for a Heisler like mine to show up on the secondhand market, so keep your eyes out if you want one, but don't want to fork over Berkshire money for a little logger. Otherwise, if you're someone who just always buys new trains, the listing price does seem to be in line with what they cost back then, so it's not as bad as some would make it seem. Still, I personally find it to be a hard pill to swallow, even with all the showmanship going on underneath. I probably would have felt the same seeing these price tags from previous catalogs. Still, the fact that they're packed with this much detail on such a small engine is really impressive. And if we're talking about little engines still doing big things, this guy is smaller than my Decapod, but it still has whistle steam. Sorry, Frisco. So is the Heisler worth more money than most regular steam engines of the same size? Absolutely. Is it worth hundreds more though? I'm not entirely sure. This is a reissued engine, so Lionel didn't have to do any new tooling to make this latest version work. The design has held up well over time, and it still looks really sharp next to other engines. But speaking of that, this little dockside switcher has an equally high level of detail on it. And these things were under $250 when they were new just a few years ago. You could literally get a small army of docksiders for one Heisler. Or you could get a docksider and a new Atlantic, and still have some cash left over for some rolling stock. Add in the fact that the Heisler is a bit of a specialized train that will look a little out of place on the main line, and this is a train that will likely need its own separate setting to look right on the layout. I've been working on my elevated line. You can check out that video if you like. And the Heisler works really great there, so I'll likely make some scenery to accompany it. I would use it in the switch yards, but the pickups don't seem to like my switches, and it loses power going between them. That's kind of been annoying, and something to note if you're looking to use this guy around linked switches. One at a time seems to be fine, but multiple switches in a row can get a little finicky. I also need to say it, my Heisler arrived with a bent drive shaft going to the tender. I carefully bent it back as much as I safely could, and while it still has a little bit of a wobble to it, it works fine enough for me. Secondhand stuff isn't always perfect, and with so much going on underneath with the Heisler, that's something you'll want to pay attention to should you go out and do the secondhand route like I did. Also, hooking up the rear drive shaft, power, and drawbar was really troublesome for me. Once I finally got things lined up, I just left it like this. Thankfully, it's a small engine, so I'm fine moving the whole thing together as one unit. I guess that's another reason to call this a mini triplex, huh? On the one hand, Lionel's high price seems to be justified by high inflation and such, though again it's a remake of an engine design that's over 20 years old. On the other hand, finding one pre-loved will get you all the same awesome detail at a fraction of the cost. And in my case, if you find the Legacy version with whistle steam, you'll be really happy with that. I know I am. So leave a comment. Which way would you lean? Let me know and leave a like while you're at it. Subscribe if you're new and hit that bell because that's the best way to know when we're making new stuff. Speaking of that, we do make new videos at least once a week, so there's plenty to watch in between new releases. Hope you enjoy those as well. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.